Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're super excited to talk about the word that is on everyone's lips these days, and maybe you're getting sick of it by now, but we're going to be talking about AI today. More specifically, we're going to be talking about kind of the hardware considerations that you should be making if you're trying to, leverage AI tools at your school with your teachers and your staff. So we've got a great speaker here today from our partners at HP and Intel. And we just can't wait to get the conversation started. But I will do a couple little housekeeping things before we start. You know the drill if you've been here before. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be watching that throughout the session, getting them to JR and Kristen as we go. If I don't get to them during the session, we have time at the end for Q&A. So stick around until that. And then at the same time, at the end of the session, I'll be launching an exit survey, and that is our way that's your way of letting us know that you want to get that coffee gift card that's part of Coffee and Convo. So stick around, take the exit survey. We'll get your questions answered by our presenters today. And that is pretty much everything from me. So I'm going to pass it over to my friend Kristen at Trafera to kind of set the table for us today and get us kicked off.
Hey, thanks, Kate. So, as Kate said, I'm Kristen. I was lucky enough to get invited to help JR with this presentation. I say help, it is very lightly. I'm saying that he is definitely the brains behind the operation. But it's just such an exciting conversation. AI is we're not getting away from it. I think I watched a special with Oprah last week. It's all over, y'all. And there's a lot of stuff that's changing just as we speak right now. And JR has quite a good bit of insight behind the scenes as to what we need to keep in mind as far as considerations with our hardware, software combination, them talking to each other correctly. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to JR. I'm just going to go ahead and give you the heads up. I ask a lot of questions. So just anybody that knows me knows. So we will be monitoring the chat and try to get everybody's questions. And I don't think anything's off the table with AI as far as what we can ask because it's all so new.
No,
thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. First off, I mean, this is you hit it right on the head. This is an exciting subject. This is kind of an exciting time in our industry. I think with AI and this new AI revolution that we're going through, because you said it, it's in everything. I mean, it's in the schools, it's in the stuff that we do day to day. It's on our TV, it's everywhere. So I think it's really important that we kind of understand that and understand the technology behind it. And what we need to be aware of. So great introduction. Thank you for that, and thank you for having me. And like I said, my name is J.R. Page. I'm the HP Intel Channel Alliance Specialist. And basically what that means is I work with both companies. I work with Intel and HP. And so I get to see both companies' perspectives on the way they see AI and they see our industry. And so with that, today I'm going to be talking a lot about AI, talking about it from a hardware standpoint, from a software standpoint, and how it affects us from an educational standpoint. So hopefully we'll hit on all these things. If you do have questions, hit them in the chat. We'll try to get to them as quick as we can, and we'll go from there. So the first thing I really want to talk about, this is more of a just to make sure everybody's aware of this, because what we're seeing right now is we're going through this AI revolution. And you're going to hear me reference that quite a bit because we do see this complete changeover in the way we do business right now. And so right now there's kind of a change going on in the industry, right? We see a rush for everybody to get some hardware to make sure that they can meet all those AI expectations that now their companies are placing upon them. With that being said, I think there's something that we all need to be aware of, and it's in about a year from now, Windows 10 is going to go end of life. I shouldn't say end of life. Let me rephrase that. It should end of support. That's the correct terminology there. And what that means is at that point, and it's in October of 2025, there's going to be a date where Microsoft no longer supports Windows 10. And if you continue on Windows 10, you're going to have to pay a fee on that. And so I think that everybody needs to be aware of that. If you're not aware of that and you don't have a refresh plan in place to move over to Windows 11, please reach out to your Trafera rep and get that started today. Because my biggest concern when I see this, and I talk to a lot of people about this process, is the fact that we're waiting. And when we've seen this happen on other transitions from different OSs to OSs, and then people wait till the last second. And the problem is then you're left with whatever you can get your hands on at that point, because everybody's kind of doing that. Microsoft recently gave us a stat that right now about 1/3 of all the PCs in the United States are not capable of running Windows 11. So you just want to be aware of that date, and I want to make sure everybody's not caught off guard by that. Because again, as we're talking about this refresh, and some of the things that people might think, hey, we need to get some hardware that meets that need. Correct, and let's just make sure that we're aware of that Windows 10 and the support date as well as we're doing that. Again, if you don't have a plan in place, please reach out to your Trafera rep already. So I wanted to make sure, as we start that everybody kind of is aware of that. Now, I do a lot of these trainings. I talk to a lot of different customers, and I've started really the first of the spring doing this. Is Intel released their new processor. I talk to a lot of people about this AI and what's happening, and what I've noticed is AI has kind of become this nebulous term that we're using. And I think when I hear that is people it intimidates people a little bit. They don't know where to start and how to start off. And so I think there's an easy way when we start considering AI and what it is start small, right? And I think when we think of AI, we want to think about it from a standpoint of how can we take care of those busy work stuff, the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, reading documents. How do we look at our emails? How do we look at our meetings? Things like that. How can we make those and automate those little tasks to make it easier for us? And so I think, because again, when I hear people talk about AI, we hear about all these great and marvelous things that are going on with AI, and it seems like a huge jump from where we're at today. But I think when we start to look at the smaller tasks first and look at it in digestible chunks, it makes it a lot easier for everybody. And so the first one is I want to talk to you guys about is to make sure when you look at your AI plan that you have going forward, and everybody should have an AI plan. If they don't, you need to get one today. And I think the first thing you start doing is look at those busy work tasks. How do we look at emails? How do we summarize large documents that we're looking at? How do we become more efficient in our day-to-day job? AI can answer a lot of those questions. And so I think that's the first thing that we start talking to ourselves about and saying, hey, how can we take these tasks that are kind of a pain in the butt, answering emails, going through meetings, how do we do that and make it easier and more efficient for us? Then what we do is we kind of transition. Once we start there, then we kind of go into those tasks that maybe are kind of the big chunk of our job, right? Whether we're creating content, we're creating PowerPoints, we're doing whatever we need to do in the classroom. How can we make those tasks that we're doing that take a lot of time and make them more efficient and make them take up less of our time, right? And I think that's where I think we're really going to find a lot of value in that. Obviously, there's value in moving some of the busy work from us to free up time. But I think once we start looking at that, then we can transition to say, hey, we have these big tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis from our job. How can AI make those tasks a lot easier for us? Again, freeing up. And when I talk about this from an educational standpoint, I think this is where it's exciting is what we all want to do is give the teachers more time to work with their students in a one-on-one setting. And I think that's what the goal is always, is that how do we do that? And AI can do so many wonders helping our students learn, but it can also do things where it frees up teachers to give them more time to spend with the teacher instead of having to do those, the automating their tasks in their classroom and creating content for their classroom and stuff like that. AI can help with that.
Right. And just to piggyback on that, JR, that is something that we focus on, the TLCs at Trafera. We want to empower teachers to be able to automate and do things that will, with AI, that will make their lives easier, especially like time-saving tips. So those are all really, really great tips. And I love how you put it in those simple columns like that. It just resonates.
Absolutely. It is such an important thing that we do. And again, I when I look at stuff and I have education is something that's really close and dear to my heart. I have a daughter who's a teacher, and so I talk with her a lot about these type of things and what they can do to free up and help those students, because this is what we're here to do, right? I think is in the educational side of things, is we want to really assist those students and free up time for when we can do those things that matter most. And I think that's what AI does, is it allows us to stop worrying about creating all this content we have to do to teach and all these type of things, and allows our teachers to do what they do best, and that's teach. And I think that's what's important.
Yeah.
And then last but not least is definitely getting into kind of the big stuff. Once we start working on those smaller things, now we can start looking at those big things. I've seen some phenomenal, especially from an educational standpoint, some tools that we can use. One that I thought was outstanding that I seen recently was the real-time translation. I think a lot of our classrooms, especially diverse classrooms, have a lot of different languages, and that can slow the learning process down. We have applications now that allow people to communicate and translate languages instantly, where they don't have to look at Google Translate and look at their phone and hold it over to somebody else. We can do this instantly now with AI. And I think once we start working on those smaller things, we can start focusing on what those big tasks are and those really things that really excite us and get us excited about AI in general.
Yeah, I agree that the translations, anytime that I have spoken of AI and I start to talk about the things it can do with it, I feel like people that are on the fence, as soon as they see that translation capability, how fast it is when you're using it like to its fullest potential, you really get the audience's attention. Like, oh, well, maybe this can be for me. Like, they don't think of that as being the AI tool, but it really is, and it's transformative.
It is. It's. I've seen, like I said, I've seen a lot of different videos. I've seen doctors using AI to help with diagnoses of stuff, and I think the real time translation is one of the most exciting ones I've seen because of just the potential and the wide variety of uses we can use with that, and how
Oh, for
important that is to kind
sure.
of help us connect. I think from a teaching standpoint, again, I have a lot of educators in my life, and I see them and I talk to them about this and how sometimes that slows down that education process when there's a language barrier. This removes that from us. Again, helping those students be able to learn things that are important to them.
Right.
Now, what I want to do too is I want to talk a little bit about the AI. Again, we're going to talk about the AI revolution. So I'm going to talk about where we're at with AI right now, currently, and then where we're going with it. One of the things is we look at AI today. Is AI, especially on the application standpoint, really resides in the cloud. And I think that's something that we know is going to change, right? Because right now we're sitting at about 70, in the mid 70s, depending on what source you're looking at. All the AI applications are residing in the cloud. Now that does a couple things, right? So that makes it so it's not available to everybody. Sometimes it's hard to get a hold of the cloud. You can't access the cloud from everywhere. The cloud's expensive. There's some security risks with the cloud. So all that being said, we understand that AI has to transition to more locally, to be held on the machine itself, right? And so with that being said, there's some changes that have to take place. We've got to make sure that as we transition that we have the hardware to support that. And now I will talk about this a lot, but when I say that AI is a journey, it's not something that we're going to buy a piece of hardware and we're set. And I think that's one of those misnomers that we have to, get out of our mind, is because it's ever evolving. When I started doing these AI trainings at the first of summer, we were sitting at about 80% of the majority of the AI applications are in the cloud, and now we're already dropped down in the 70s. And so we're seeing that happen literally as we speak. That those percents are changing because we know that it needs to become more local, right? To become accessible to everybody, needs to be more secure, and so we're seeing this transition. Now, with that being said, there's some changes that are going to happen with the way our hardware we look at our hardware today. And so that's where Intel comes into play, right? They released their Intel Core Ultra processor earlier this year, and what that chip did is it represented the largest architectural chip design change in the last 40 years from Intel. And that's saying something, but really I seen this visual and it really resonated with me. One of my colleagues rolled out a old machine. It's from the late 70s, one of the first Intel machines that they had out there, and they said that there's more of a technology upgrade from our last generation of processor to this new Intel Core Ultra processor than there was from that machine that he rolled out from the 70s than there was to the last update. And I thought that was incredible. When I seen that, it kind of blew my mind a little bit, and to put that into perspective. And so I think that's something that to really take into account when we talk about just how big of a revolution that this AI is and how it's changing us from a hardware standpoint.
Okay, can I ask a question just to make sure
Absolutely.
that I'm processing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I already know the answer because we've had some conversations. we're not wanting to put all of our AI information in the cloud because it's just not the securest way. So we're trying to do as much as we can locally as possible. So because of that, our processors need to be capable of that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So that
Yep.
was my layman's. Remember we talked about AI for
Yes.
dummies. That's where I am. So the layman's term is we want to get things on our devices, but our devices have to be capable and not in the cloud.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And what we'll talk about next is we'll talk about, and again, I don't want to bore you a lot with the speeds and feeds, some of the technology side of things, but I think it's important that we understand what the differences are in our chips and why that matters. What you'll see here on my screen is a diagram of what an Intel chip looks like. Prior to the release of the Intel Core Ultra processor, right, we were used to a GPU and a CPU. And for you, those of you who know that the CPU, right, is ideal for those fast responsive tasks, you know, answering emails, getting those updates that happen, something that they're going on quick. Whereas our GPU was more designed for those high throughput tasks, things like content creation, things that, you know, when you working on Excel, when you start working on things and you see that little spinner going around and you make it thinking, that's what our GPU kind of comes into play right there. Now you can run AI applications on just those two, and it will be okay. The problem was it slows everything down a bit. And so with the release of the Intel Core Ultra processor, we reintroduced you to the NPU, or the neural processing unit. Now this NPU, what it does is it's designed to handle all of our AI applications on the chip. And so it frees up our GPU and our CPU to do all those things that they're normally used to, and process them more efficiently. And I think that that's where it really comes into play, is we're able now to handle those AI applications, especially as we start to look at moving a lot of these applications more locally. We can handle them quicker, faster, and more efficiently. With this, we've seen actually about a 2 to 2.5 hour difference in battery life, just because of this NPU. You know, again, it frees up those GPU. We don't have to use as much power. The other thing that it's done is it's allowed us to run our processes at a cooler temperature, which kind of saves all the components around it and makes our machines last a lot longer, which I think resonates with all of us. So this is what the new design and the new architecture is about. Is about running these AI applications more efficiently, with not as much power, right, to save everything for it. And so that's kind of what it is, from a hardware standpoint, and why this architecture update is so important. And it's so important that we make sure that we have the right hardware in addition to everything else. The one thing too I do want to bring up is you'll hear a lot of people talk about the AI PC. And when you hear an AI PC, I think there's a lot of definitions to what that means. But what it really means, and I think put it in the simplest form, is AI is software and hardware, and AI PC is the software and hardware working together to accomplish what we want to do a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. And I think that that's when you think of an AI PC, think of those two things. And that's why the NPU is so important, and we think it's really vital to, you know, our AI journey as we move forward into different things. Now, here's some numbers that you're going to see. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this and bore you with some numbers, but you can kind of see what it means with them. So what we're seeing is with this new processor and because of the architectural design, we're seeing a 47% increase versus our 3-year-old machines. We're running Office applications, which we know we're all familiar with and use quite a bit. And then the big one is that middle stat right there. We've kind of talked about it already, but we're seeing a 36% power reduction when we're running, you know, Office apps like Zoom and Teams and things like that. What that does, and again, I want to point out that's generation over generation. That 36% is not over versus a 3-year-old machine. Again, allowing us to be able to have longer battery life, and use our power more efficiently, which is something that's very, very important when we look at our machine. So with that, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, is talking about how important the software side of things are, right? So we talked about the hardware piece and understanding the hardware piece and why that's important. Now it's also important that we have the software side of things, right? Because a lot of these AI applications are on the software side, and we need to make sure that we're capable of running those. Now, Intel works currently with about over 300 different ISVs, which are independent software vendors, making sure that their AI applications work seamlessly with our hardware. We have an open architecture on some of our chips that allow these guys to go in and test their software out on our chips, making sure that they work, making sure that when you buy these hardware that if you're using any of these applications you see on the screen here, that they're going to work seamlessly, that you don't have to start doing a bunch of different things to make them work once you get this machine. Because nothing's more frustrating than saying, hey, I use Adobe a lot in my classroom and I need to make sure that it works. And then all of a sudden you get a new hardware and you go, okay, well now to make this application work, you have to download this app and you have to do this and that, configure it a certain way. That's not the case with Intel because we've already worked with these guys to make sure they work seamlessly with them. So you can see some of those logos. I'm not going to go over all these softwares on here because we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the educational things and things that are more important to you guys. But it's very important when you think about who do you want to go with from an AI perspective. And I think when you look at HP and Intel and the relationships they have in the channel, that's why they're so valuable. And that's why it's so important to work with guys like that have those established relationships, because they do work together with those people.
Well, it's nice when stuff happens on the back end and it takes the load off of the users. I mean, that's just conversation right there. You don't have to worry about it. It's already done.
Absolutely. And again, when you buy hardware, you want it to work with the software that you're running. And so that's really important to everybody, I think. Now I want to get into stuff that's probably a little more relevant to you guys, and I think you're going to find really important to you. And it's kind of what Intel's vision is for AI in education. So this is something that's very, very important. And I think first off, when Intel looks at this, is they really kind of take a three-pronged approach to this AI adoption into education, right? And the first thing they want to make sure that AI is accessible and available for everybody, right? And I think that's important when we look at this. We don't want it just to be in one segment or one group of people have access to it. We want everybody to be able to have access to it. We think that AI has the capability to kind of revolutionize education and the way we teach our children. And I think it's important that it's available to everybody. So Intel's making, a concerted effort to, and make that number one on their list of attacking this AI adoption into education. They want to make sure everybody has access to it. Next, I think this one's really, really important, is keeping it safe and responsible. As part of my travels this early this spring, I went to an education event down south in South Carolina, and we talked about this ad nauseum about how important it is to make sure that AI is safe and that we use it responsibly. We can't just use AI and think that it's going to fix everything and that it's the answer, that we're replacing teachers with this. That's not the case, right? We need to make sure that it's used responsibly. And with that being said, Intel's established what's called the Responsible AI Program. Now, this is a program that they use to utilize rigorous and multidisciplinary review process throughout the development of the life cycle and establish diverse development terms and teams to reduce biases and collaborate with industry partners to mitigate potential harmful uses of AI. Right? That's a mouthful, but I think really what they're just trying to do is making sure that we use it responsible, that there's people that are looking at it from all different walks of life, and making sure it's safe for our kids, safe for our students, safe for people to use, but it's also that we use it responsibly and we don't use it to replace different things, and we use it to make sure that it's for that goal is things easier and to help educate our children more than anything else. Very, very important.
And I would almost argue to say that most school districts, administration, district down, is probably going to argue that the keeping it safe and responsible is going to be before the AI everywhere, because they're not going to make sure it's everywhere until they know for sure that their students and their data and everybody involved is safe. And that's what we find is the hiccup. So I would think, moving forward, I feel like every time I look at something AI related, that is kind of the conversation. Is it like it's been vetted, like we know what we've got out there is protecting your data. So that's like a huge thing before we can even talk about it, is we have to prove that it is safe.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that's what Intel's, when they see this, is they see that as well, as using AI safely and responsibly is really important. Because I think we all know if you're trying to do something that's brand new, you put it in a classroom,
it's scary,
and you have an issue, it's going to ruin it and change our impression of AI forever. And so we need to make sure that works, and it works responsibly and safely for our students and for our teachers as well, and for our classrooms. So definitely it's something that we think very, very important. And I'd love to see these, this AI program that they're putting in place. They have multiple teams that are working on this. So when they see a software, they're vetting it out. They're making sure that it's doing what we want it to do, that it's producing the results that we want it to do. And they're correct, right? Because we've seen some of that with AI. We've seen some, things that aren't as where we want it to be yet. And so it's important that when we give it that stamp of approval from an Intel side, that we have vetted it out. Very, very important to us. And then the last of all these on their third thing they look at is the scaling AI, right? And I think that we've kind of talked a lot about that and why that's important, making sure that it's, not just in the cloud, but it's available locally, something that's very, very important. So this is the kind of three-pronged approach that Intel's taking to education. Now, this next slide, and it's kind of a busy slide. There's a lot of information on here. I'm not going to touch on each of these points, but it really just talks about the excitement that's around AI and all the amazing things that it can do. Because AI and making it scalable for our students we can do a bunch of wonderful different things. We see it, in collaboration with video that our students can use. We see it in esports, and I don't know if you guys see this on your side. Esports is one of the fastest growing groups in the tech industry right now. We see a ton of it available, and then we talk about doing content creation. How can our students work together, being more productive? How they can learn those type of things. All these things are an important part of that. Definitely don't want to skip over security and privacy, because I think that's something. Anytime you work in the cloud and then AI, you want to make sure that's something that's front on our minds. So these are all ways that we're going to help the students out and make sure that we're using programs that help them learn. Because the one thing that's evident is when these guys get in the workforce, and we look at AI today, they have to have an understanding of AI. The only way you get that is by using it. And I think that that's important that as we start teaching these kids, we show them how to use it and how to use it responsibly.
That's right.
So
don't be scared of it, because they're going to use it whether we show them or not.
So yeah, that's 100% true. There could not have been a more accurate statement. They're going to use it. We know that they're using it. They're using it today. They're using it probably more than all of us are right now on this call. It's important that we teach them how to use it correctly and how to use it productively, right? And not just for some of the things that they do in games and different things of that nature.
Right. It's going to be in their lifetime. It's going to be in their careers. Like, we need to show them the responsible use and how it can actually benefit them, not just help them get stuff done faster. And I love that they're going to be, so this is the AI PC for educators. So it's going to be part of their devices. That's what I'm seeing, right?
Yes. And I do think that that's one of the things. So this concentrates on a lot of talking about the students, and we've talked a lot about that student side of things. But I think it's very, very important that we look at this from a teacher standpoint as well, and making sure that we get the teachers devices that can make them more productive in the classroom, make them be able to spend more time with the students, and get the most out of their teaching abilities. Because the one thing that we believe is that the teacher's device is the most used instructional tool in the modern classroom. And so we need to make sure that when we talk to our teachers and we talk to, of how we're outfitting these from a hardware standpoint, that we give them the capabilities to be able to utilize all these vast resources they have before them. We have to give them a device that's going to be able to run all of these type of things. And the one thing is, I think that's going to take some time, because it's going to have to change our mindset. I think from an educational standpoint, we sometimes think of getting them, something that's just cheap and can get them, make it useful. But I think that we need to look at that a little deeper and say, hey, we may have to spend a little bit more up front to give them a device that can run all these applications. But over time, what that's going to do, not only to make them better teachers, but to reduce the burnout that teachers get, and to reduce, make their job more enjoyable. And I think that what we see from an educational standpoint is that's one of the concerns that we have, for teachers, is the fact that they're under so much stress and scrutiny with all these type of things. We have to make sure that we're making their jobs easier, and so they can be more efficient and teach our children, because it's so important that we do that.
Amen to all that.
Yes, absolutely. And then what this next slide, and again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because I do want to talk a little bit more about the security piece, and I know we're kind of running short on time here. But these are some of the applications that we see used in the classroom. And I think that this is important. We see it kind of in 4 different pillars, right? We see a collaboration side of things, using things like, removing distractions from our students, being able to track their eyes, which is a phenomenal way. I know a lot of teachers want to watch what their students are doing, and they can kind of see whether they look at them, what they're doing and what they're finding. So I think that's important. Also, noise suppression. When you have those background noises that are going on, get them out, because those, what we know as students, they got that one track focus, right? Especially the younger kids, and we need to make sure that we remove those things from them to make them be able to get the most out of their learning experience. But we see it in our hybrid work, of how we work with teachers. Sometimes we're working remotely with them. Sometimes we're in the classroom. In other classrooms, we've got to be able to use these type of things to make their teachers more efficient and to make our students be able to learn better. We see it in content creation, tons of different avenues into that. And then last but not least, the digital visualization, being able to show them things, create different reports, create different images that they need to use in their classroom, and teaching them how to use AI. All right. The next thing I want to talk about here from Intel standpoint, I think it's very important. We've talked a lot about this, is a security piece, right? I think it's vital when we talk about all these things. They're all phenomenal. There's so many different things that we can do from a AI standpoint and from a hardware standpoint, but we have to. It doesn't matter if our devices are the best at handling AI if they're not secure. And so that's important for IT directors in the school. They need to be able to make sure that they're able to handle things they need. And so we have what's called Intel vPro, right? And so that's something that allows us to be able to manage our fleets from a security standpoint, and being able to manage a big, large fleet. And so I think it's important. Right? When you look at vPro, there's 4 different pillars in it. The productivity side, which we've talked a lot about with the new processors, but also from the security side, being able to secure our PCs from viruses and different things as we're accessing different programs, being able to make sure that our machines are protected above and below the OS, something that's very, very important. And then I think the last 2 are really important. And I think it's the manageability piece, being able to find ways to manage our fleets, being able to push out updates when we need to, being able to access devices if they die or they go down, being able to fix them without having to be right in front of that machine is important. The vPro allows us to do that and remotely take care of a lot of those issues that they may have. And then the stability piece, right? I think it's important. Nothing's more frustrating than we get a new device and then we have new drivers to update and all that kind of stuff to have to change images. With HP and vPro's stability piece, right, we're going to do our best effort to make sure that we're not changing the components of our processors or the drivers for 15 months or until the release of a new processor, right? It's, again, allowing us to have that stability and peace of mind that it's not going to change continually. Now, this is a lot more kind of goes into that protection standpoint, because I think this is really important, right? Our view from an Intel standpoint of the way to make a security piece and talk about that is to be able to recover, detect, and prevent any issues that happen, right? So if there is, we want to prevent any viruses or anything like that from happening to our devices. We also want to be able to detect them if we see them on there. It's very important to detect them quickly so we can get rid of them. And then, heaven forbid, there's something that happens, we want to be able to recover quickly, right? So this is kind of what we look at when we look at our security pieces, making sure that these are the 3 pillars we look at and take care of so our devices are protected. This just kind of goes into the numbers part of it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think it just talks about how it's important as we upgrade our devices, because having old devices really makes us vulnerable to viruses and different type of attacks, things like that. So it's important that we're aware of that and that we get the latest and greatest devices into our schools and classrooms. And then this is kind of like we talked about before, is that manageability piece. And I think when we talk about from a classroom standpoint, this is really important. From an IT standpoint, specifically, is being able to not have to go to classroom to every device and be able to manage the drivers and all that type of stuff, being able to manage it at one location, whether it's offsite or whether it's on-site, vital. And the vPro allows us to be able to do that, to manage those devices remotely, and give us that, our IT, the peace of mind that these devices are protected. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, I want to just make it really brief right here, though, is to talk about where we're going with this. We talked about the Meteor Lake processor, which is what we recently, what we've been talking about. Here in the first year in 2025, we're going to be releasing the Lunar Lake. right? So that's something that we'll want you to be aware of. Lunar Lake's not a replacement for Meteor Lake, but it's going to be another device that we're going to bring in, or a processor. It's going to be kind of on the premium side. Make sure you're aware of that. And then the last thing is I want to just briefly touch on is kind of this TOPS, right? What you'll just see is we work with AI and work with different applications. TOPS is that big metric that's out there. So if you're not aware, TOPS, what it represents is it's the trillions of operations per second. So that's how we're going to kind of look at all of our processors, and we're kind of chasing these high numbers right now to kind of put it into perspective. Most of AI applications are using about 15 to 20, 25 ops. That's what it takes to run an AI application right now. But in the future, we're going to need more than that. We're going to need, 50, 60, and it's going to continue to rise. And so TOPS is that metric. Just be aware of that. And so every time we're going to release something, we're going to see that. But again, I think it's important that when we talk about TOPS, that we look at, they're not all equal. Just like when we looked at processors before and we looked at different cores and things like that, all cores weren't created equal. There were some cores that were faster than others. I think TOPS is the same thing. It's important that we have a good TOPS number, but it's also important that we have the security, the infrastructure around that to make sure it's a secure, and then it gives you the performance that you need. So those are something that you can look forward to in the future. And again, we can come back and talk about that further if you need to, but I just wanted to make you guys all aware of kind of where we're going with the future of this and the future of the AI PC. And that's all that I have. I know it's a lot of information. I hope you guys are able to find some of this useful. But again, thank you so much for having me on. I've enjoyed it. And I always enjoy talking to educators. So you guys have a tough job, and we love supporting you. So thank you so much for all that you guys do out there.
Yeah, and guys, that was a lot of information. It really was. Like, I did not know a lot of those acronyms and words, but wow. I mean, it makes sense. AI is improving so many different things. It's going to come with its own little card of all the things we have to learn. But just to remind y'all, Trifera, we partner with HP. We work very closely with them. We sell, provide, train on devices, and when we don't have the answers, we know people like JR. So please remember to reach out to us. Kate has launched an exit survey. If you want to tell them about that, Kate.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's launched now. So if you take the time to do that exit survey, gives us a little bit of information about you, gives you the chance to let us know if you're interested in one of us reaching out to you to talk about this topic. So please take the time to do that before you head out, and that will get you the coffee gift card. So that's pretty much that. We don't have any questions in the chat, so I think with that, we can just say goodbye for the day. I know we ran a little bit long, so thank you for sticking around with us, but thank you, JR.
So much good information. That's why.
So much good information. This recording is going to be on our YouTube channel within the next couple days. So if the information overload or you just need to, share what you learned with someone on your team, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel in the next couple days. But thank you again so much for being here. And with that, signing off.
Thanks, JR.
Thanks, appreciate it.